In this lesson, we're going to look at multiplying and dividing rational expressions. So for example, here's our first example. So you're going to typically have a fraction, and then this little dot means multiply, and then there's another fraction. So what do? Do we need to get a common denominator? No. What we need to do is I want you to think of this as 4 individual parts, and all you need to do is go factorize each part as much as you can. So this part cannot be factorized, this cannot, and this cannot. So don't worry about those. However, this one can be factorized. It is a trinomial, so you could factorize it into 2 brackets. And I assume your level of factorizing trinomials is fairly good right now. You may want to pause and just make sure you agree with me with that trinomial factorization, but this is what we have. All that you're going to do now is look for things that are the same at the top and the bottom. So for example, this is the same as this. So the one is at the top, the one's at the bottom, so we can cancel it out. This one's at the top, this one's at the bottom, we can cancel it out. And we are now left with x plus 1 as our final answer. So for the remainder of this video, we will do another 7 examples. Some of them will be multiplying, some of them will be dividing. Here's our next one. So this one has a divide. So whenever you see a divide between 2 fractions, always do the following. Use the KCF method. So keep, change, flip. So what do I mean? Keep the first one the same, change the sign. So let's go change the sign from a divide to a multiply, and then flip the next one upside down. So 7b squared, take away 35b, and then at the bottom you would have b squared, add 13b, add 42. Now go ahead, factorize each of the 4 parts. So you factorize this one, and this one as much as possible. So this one is a trinomial, so I would factorize that into 2 brackets, and it would be b plus 6, b plus 1. If you need to just pause and just think about that a bit, that's fine. Do that, please. Don't move on until you agree with me on that. The bottom one, you can't do anything, so we'll just leave that as b plus 1. And then for this next part, you could... People often, I get this a lot, learners that try this one, and they're like, Kevin, bro, we can't do anything there, my dude. It's not a difference of square, and it's not a trinomial. And then I'm just like, my bro, my homie, why don't you just realize you always have to look for a common factor first? Common factor, okay? So you could take out a common factor of 7b, and then they're always like, I always forget. So remember, common factor first. You take out a 7b, and then you'd be left with b, take away 5, okay? Don't forget the common factor. It's actually the thing we're supposed to try first. And then you're going to have 2 brackets for this bottom part because it's a trinomial. And 42. 42. What could we do, guys? What could we do? 7 times 6 would work. 7 times 6, because that also gives us 13. As I said, if you need to pause and just think about that a bit, that's absolutely normal. So b plus 6, b plus 7. Right, now what you do is you just look for things that are at the top that are also at the bottom. So for example, this b plus 6 and this b plus 6, they can cancel. This b plus 1 with this b plus 1, they can cancel. People might say, yeah, but what about this 7b and this b plus 7? They are not the same, so you're actually going to leave those alone. And so at the top, we're left with 7b, b take away 5, and at the bottom, we are left with b plus 7. Now, many teachers are going to ask you to please make sure that the top, the numerator, is multiplied out. So let's do that. I'm just going to multiply the 7b back into the bracket, so it'll become 7b squared, take away 35b, and then at the bottom, we left with b plus 7. Here's our next example. So here we have a divide sign. So what do we do? KFC. No, not KFC. That's food that people eat. It's KCF. Not KFC. It's keep, change, flip. Okay? So you keep the first part the same. So let's go write it out. Then you change the sign from a divide to a times, and then you flip. So this one will become b minus 6 over 9b. There we go. Now you just go ahead, factorize everything. Now if you look at this and you're like, Kevin, I can't factorize that. Remember, common factor, okay? So you for that part, you could take out a common factor of 4b. Okay, you might say, yeah, but there's a common factor of 2. I can take out a 2. I agree with you, but you want to take out the most. You want to take out the largest number, okay? So, and then you'd be left with b plus 2 over here. Remember, I might go a little fast, so you must always just pause the video, try it yourself, and only if you get things wrong, then see where you went wrong. But try these questions yourself. When I was a student, that was the way I did it. I'd also use YouTube or whatever, or online courses or anything like that. But I would always pause the video first. Obviously, I need to learn how to do it, but once you know the basics, then you got to practice. So you pause the video, and then you try it yourself. And then if you don't get to the correct answer, then of course that's where the video is really powerful, because it can help you to see what you did wrong. Okay? But if you're just going to sit and watch me do this, it's going to be too fast. Okay? So this one here is a trinomial. So, like, you need to pause the video and think about this trinomial for yourself. You need to think exactly how you would factorize it. But that one would factorize as b take away 6 and then b add 2, because that would give you this. You can always check yourself by multiplying these two brackets together again and making sure that this is what you get. And then over here you got b take away 6 over 9b. Okay, so is there anything that's the same at the top and the bottom? Well, yes, this b and this b is the same. You might be saying, yeah, but Kevin, what about the 4 and the 9? They're not the same. Don't worry about those. The 4 and the 9 are not actually part of the b, okay? The b is its own little thing, so take that away, take that away. The b plus 2, take it away, take it away. The b minus 6, top and bottom. Oh, wow, so all that we're left with is 4 over 9. Here's our next one. So it's got a little divide sign, so remember KCF. So keep, change, flip. So keep the first one, the first fraction, that's what we mean. Change the sign, and then flip the trinomial upside down. Now we're going to go and factorize. So this is a trinomial. So you got to try to think about this trinomial. So 32 is the same as 8 times 4. Yes, you can say 2 times 16 and those types of things, but that's never going to give us the trinomial that we want. Okay, so we could say b take away 8 and b add 4. At the bottom we can't do anything there. In the top right over here we could factorize that one as p take away 9, p add 1. You must remember, I've been doing this for I've been making these videos for a long time. So I think since 2016. So yeah, I mean, whatever year you're watching this in, I've been doing this for a while. So it comes completely naturally. I can literally look at this and tell you the answer immediately. But that's normal. That's with everything in life. If you practice it enough, I mean, I'm sure some of you watching this have some insane talents. Like some, I'm not saying everyone, like some people, not everyone has insane talents, but there are some. And it's all based on what you practice. Like if you spend hours and hours and hours, which is what I do. I spend hours and hours and hours in front of my computer making videos because it's what I love. But with that comes this constant practice of me doing this stuff. So I've perfected it. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. It's like, it's obvious. It's with anything in life. If you sit and you practice something, you will become good. Okay? There's no question about that. So, yeah, so you may need to just slow down a bit when you're factorizing these and just make sure that it makes sense, okay? I can tell you that not all students do it quickly like what I'm doing. So if you're sitting there and you're like, my bro, I can't even factorize it that quickly. Trust me, that's okay. You just want to pause the video and try it, okay? And then this bottom part, you might be saying, yeah, I don't think I can do anything there. Common factor. Take out a common factor, and you'd be left with p take away 9. Okay, there we go. Now what happens is we have to cancel. So anything that looks the same at the top and the bottom, cancel it out. Here, this p minus 9 and this p minus 9, it's the same, and that's about it. So at the top, we're left with p take away 8, and we're also left with a p add 1. At the bottom, we are just left with a 9. Now, depending on how your teacher does this, but many teachers do not like you to leave brackets at the top. They don't mind if there's brackets at the bottom, but they want the top to be to be completely multiplied out. So I'm going to go do that because that's what I've seen with most schools and most teachers, okay? So if you had to go multiply this out using the FOIL, so we start with first times first, then the O stands for the outer. Now you can do this in your own way, but this is the method I mostly use. then inner, so that means the most inner one, and the most inner one, so that's going to be that, and then L, which stands for last times last, which is -8. And then at the bottom, we still have 9. Then if you put these two together, that's -7p, so that's going to give us p squared, take away 7p, take away 8, and then at the bottom, we have 9. If your teacher wants you to keep it factorized at the top, that's absolutely fine. Here's our next one. So it's got a divide sign, so that means you're going to keep the first fraction exactly as it is. You're going to turn it into a multiply, and then you're going to flip the fraction upside down. So 25x take away 20, and then at the bottom, you're going to be left with that over there. Now you cannot factorize that. It's a single term, so you leave that one as it is. You cannot factorize this. You can factorize this by taking out a 5, and then you'd be left with 5x take away 4. Here you could take out the largest number there, you could take out as a 3, and this one has an x3, this one has an x squared, so you could take out an x squared as a common factor, and then you'd be left with 5x take away 4. Now, you can cancel these two because they are exactly the same. You could even cancel this 5 and this 5. They are exactly the same. The 18 and the 3, you could divide them, and that would be 6, so that you'd be left with a 6 at the top, over there. And then here we have an x3 and an x2. So if you have x3, which is the same as x, and then at the bottom you have x squared, which is x times x, then you could think of those cancelling and those cancelling, and then you're just left with an x at the top. So we're going to be left with a 6x at the top, and nothing at the bottom, like all of this cancelled out. So that's the answer, 6x. You could say 6x over 1 if you want to, but it's the same thing. So here's a normal multiply, so we don't have to use any flipping or changing of signs. So this one's going to be quite an interesting one to factorize. The reason is that this number is not it's not a 1. So for these type of trinomials, some learners really struggle with them. You're going to have to look at this number, and you're going to have to look at this number. Maybe you've watched some of my videos before on how to factorize these types of trinomials. Maybe you forgot if you've watched that video or not, but it's this technique here where you write all the numbers at the top and the bottom, and then you choose a number at the top here, and you choose a number here, and then you choose a number here and a number here, and then you do this type of thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about right now, then you obviously just haven't watched those videos. But if maybe right now you're like, oh yeah, I remember. So let's have a go. So what we do, and because all the trinomials that we've looked at in the previous parts of this lesson, all of them had a 1 in the front. Can you see that? They all have a 1 in the front. All of them. Now, there we go. And if we go back, you see, they all had a 1 in the front. But now, we are busy with an example where there's a 3 in the front. And normally you could take out a 3 as a common factor, but with this one you can't. So we're pretty stuck, like we have a number there. So what you do in this type of scenario, because normally you only had to look at this number, right? Like in these previous examples, you would only look at the 32, and you would say like 8 times 4, and then you would try to make this one. We never ever looked at this number, but now we have to. So what you do is you take all of this number's factors. So you could say 1 times 3, or you could say 3 times 1. Now for 70, oh my goodness, you could say 1 times 70, or 70 times 1. 2 times 35, or 35 times 2. 5 times 14, or 14 times 5. I'm running out of space. You could also say 7 times 10, and 10 times 7. So I think those are the only factors. Now, you have to somehow choose a number here. Okay, so let's just do an example together. Let's say we chose 1, okay? Then you're going to have to choose a number over here. Okay, so you just chose 1 and 5. So you say 1 times 5. Then you have to choose the number above and below. So that would be this one and this one. So you'd say 14 multiplied by 3, and that's going to give you, so that gave you 5, and 14 multiplied by 3 is 42. You're then going to look at these two numbers and see, could that ever somehow plus or minus to give you negative 11? Never. You could never plus 5 and 42 or subtract them to get negative 11. So then that means we need to go restart, and that is the idea behind these questions. So that's what we've got to sort of try do. So I'll give you another example. We could say, for example, 3 times, I don't know, I'm just going to choose a random one. Let's say 3 times 5, okay? Now 3 times 5 is 15. So now you have to choose the number above and below. So that would be this one and this one. So that would be 14 multiplied by 1, which is 14. Could a 15 and a 14 ever plus or minus to give you negative 11? Nope, it would never work. Okay, so maybe you want to pause the video and try to see if you can find the right combination. So what you would do is you could say 3 times 7, which is 21. And then you have to take the number at the top and the number at the bottom, which is then 10 times 1, which is 10. Now 21 and 10 could definitely make negative 11. You could say 10 take away 21. Okay, so then what you do is you make the two brackets. The numbers at the top, they go in the first bracket. Or they go in one of the brackets. Okay, and then the numbers at the bottom, they go in the second bracket or the other bracket. Okay, now we need to decide what signs we need to use, positives or negatives. Now that's not that difficult. If you had to multiply these two together, that's 21. But did we want the 21 to be negative or positive? Well, we want it to be negative, so we put a little negative over there. When you multiply these two together, you wanted the 10 to be a positive, so you'd put a little plus over there. That's how we do it, okay? So, and then at the bottom here, 5n plus 4, you can't take out a common factor. Over here, you can take out a common factor of 4, so you'd be left with 5n add 4. For this one, we have to go do the same type of process because this number in the front is not a 1. So you have to go take all the factors of 3, which would be 1 times 3 and 3 times 1, and then all the factors of 20. So 1 times 20, 20 times 1, 10 times 2. Okay, I'm going to run out of space. So 1 times 20, 20 times 1, 2 times 10, 10 times 2, 5 times 4, 4 times 5. So you know the idea now. You got to choose a number so that we can actually put little, oh no, that's not going to work. We're going to have to choose, we're going to try and make the number 4. So for example, if we choose 1 and 5, okay, so that's 1 times 5, which is 5. But then you could choose 4 times 3, because you have to choose the number above and below, and that's 12. So 5 and 12 will never be able to give you a 4. So then we restart, because that was not the correct combination that we are looking for. Okay, so maybe pause, see if you can find it. So for example, we could say 3 times 2. Okay, 3 times 2, which is 6. And then 10 times 1, which is 10. And so 6 and 10, if you say 10 take away 6, let me write that nicely, 10 take away 6, that would give you 4. And that's what we're trying to make. Okay, so you go ahead and you make your two brackets. The top numbers, put them into one bracket. The bottom numbers, put them into their own bracket. Now, you got to try to figure out the signs. So if you had to multiply these two together, that would give you 6. But we want the 6 to be a negative, so we put a negative there. And then if you multiply these two, you get 10. And we want the 10 to be positive, so you do it like that. There we go. Now we need to just cancel things that are the same at the top and the bottom. So for example, 3n plus 10 cancels with 3n plus 10. 5n plus 4 cancels with 5n plus 4. And so all that we're left with at the top is 4. And then there's a n minus 7. At the bottom, we're left with a n minus 2. Now, as I said, most teachers would want you to multiply the top out. So you'd be left with 4n take away 28 over n take away 2. Two more examples. Well done for making it this far. So we know that it's a divide, so we're going to have to switch it around. So we leave the first fraction exactly as it is, then change it to a multiply, and then we're left with 4y squared, add y, take away 5, and then at the bottom, we're left with 10y squared, add 2y. So now we're just going to go factorize. So this one you might say, yeah, you can't. But remember, take out a common factor. That common factor is y, and then you'd be left with 5y plus 1. This one's a difference of squares. Remember, if you have two terms separated with a negative, and each term is a perfect square, this is y times y, this is 1 times 1, then you can make two brackets and say y plus 1, y take away 1. Here we have one of these horrible trinomials again that are pretty tricky to work with. So you need to take the 4 and the 5, and you need to go make this little diagram that we spoke about in the previous examples. So 1 times 4, 4 times 1, 2 times 2. Now 5 is 1 times 5 and 5 times 1. Okay, you get the idea now. We got to try and make the number 1. So we could do that by saying 4 multiplied by 1, which is 4. And then you have to choose the number above and below, which is 5 times 1, which is 5. Now, a 5 and a 4 can definitely give us a 1. How would you do that? You could say 5 take away 4. Okay, so what you do is you open 2 brackets, and then you're going to take the top numbers, they'll go in one bracket together, and then the bottom numbers will go in another bracket. Okay, or it's a 1y. Okay, so now remember, you want the 5 to be a positive number. So if you had to multiply these two, that would give you a 4. Now we wanted the 4 to be negative, so we'll put a negative. If you multiply these two, you wanted the 5 to be a positive, so you'll put a plus over there. Okay, and then at the bottom here, you could take out a common factor of 2y, and you'd be left with 5y add 1. So now we can look at top and bottom. So this y minus 1 and this y minus 1 are the same. This 5y plus 1 and this 5y plus 1 are the same. This y and this y, they're the same. And I think that's about it. So our final answer then would be 4y plus 5. And then at the bottom, we would still be left with a 2, random little 2, and then a y plus 1, which is this one over here. Our last example, well done for making it this far. I know it's pretty tiring doing these types of questions. So this first one is a trinomial, but it's a nice trinomial because this number in the front is a 1. So we don't need to use this method that I was showing you just earlier. So we're just going to make 2 brackets. This would be x take away 5, x add 2. At the bottom over here, you could factorize that into 2 brackets. It would be x take away 2 and another x take away 2. Over here, you could take out x as a common factor. You'd be left with x take away 2. And then with this one, you cannot do anything, so you just leave it like that. So now what happens is you just cancel, cancel. This one can cancel with this one. And that's about it. So at the top, you're just left with an x and an x plus 2. At the bottom, we are left with an x take away 2. Now, as I said, most teachers prefer that the top does not have brackets. So let's go multiply that out so long. So you'd be left with something like that. X squared add 2x, and then at the bottom, x take away 2.